Good evening, everyone. Today is May the 11th, 2021. And today is, right now, it's 5:35. And on behalf of the Board of Education, our superintendent, our independent monitor, and all those good folks who work diligently on behalf of our children and families, I say good evening. It is a good evening for some, for many of us, but for others, in our country, it has been a bit of a challenge for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons that I want to address today as part of maybe a moment of silence, although we usually do that during our larger meetings, our business meetings, I feel especially compelled to do that today as this month we've had, actually, I think within the last week or so, we've had 10 mass shootings, resulting in 17 lives lost and 33 people who have been injured. This doesn't account for the shootings and the sad and tragic loss of life that occurs throughout this country when any individual takes down another individual through the use of a gun or a knife or any instrumentality that ends someone's life. As urban educators, we feel this frequently and regularly. Our superintendent has spoke of it. Other leaders throughout this community have spoken of it. But speaking doesn't always do the trick. I'm a firm believer, and I know some of my colleagues are, that prayer can fix things sometimes. Also, sometimes just putting our collective thoughts together in a moment of silence, praying and putting all our emotional energy towards those folks who suffered losses, like these 17 individuals and their families, can sometimes have an impact as well. So I'd ask on behalf of the entire Board of Education and all the folks that work diligently throughout this community to make lives better for children, that we just set aside a minute or two, a minute or less, for those folks who have suffered the loss of life. Thank you. All right. The business of the board has to continue on, and we got a full plate of business this evening. And we're going to begin that business, as we always do with these types of meetings, by listening to our citizens who surround us and try to guide us and give us direction and sometimes criticism. Madam Speaker, I understand we have one speaker on for today.
Yes, we have one speaker, Cynthia Clay, who is going to be joining us in the room right now, and she'll be speaking about summer school and transportation. Ms. Clay, are you there? Just bringing her into the room now. Ms. Clay?
So we opened
Welcome, Ms. Clay. You're going to need to turn off your other stream.
We got our LLC.
It's going to echo.
Hold on.
We did all these,
don't know how to do that.
things that were administrative tasks. We were like, hey, we've got a business here. We got business cards. We have titles.
It sounds like you're listening to something else.
I'm in school, so I am like multitasking to the 9th degree. Yeah.
All right, whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes, Ms. Clay.
Okay. I just wanted to come on and ask, was there going to be a consideration? My kids always go to Encompass program every year, and that helps them to build their character, helps with everything going on. And they have had, I think, educational loss this past year, and over the year when they were, last year with COVID being just at the forefront of everything. So I was just wondering, was there going to be something in place for the kids, for my kids, sort of like Encompass or whatever like that? And I just wanted to strongly urge the board to consider, what are we going to do about the kids? All right. That's all I had to say.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clay. I hope administration is listening and someone will be able to get back to you regarding that matter tomorrow to follow up on Encompass, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
President White, that's the last speaker for tonight.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. As a matter of fact, I'm very confident that someone from the administration is listening, and our superintendent will ensure that someone will contact Ms. Clay to address her concerns directly as they relate specifically to her children. Thank you, Ms. Clay, and thank you to all the citizens who take the time to call in and express their concerns. Some of them do relate directly to their individual children, like Ms. Clay, and quite often people are dial in to talk about general concerns they have about the district. And we, as members of the Board of Education, appreciate you all sharing your input and your concerns. It helps us do our job. So thank you for that. Next item on our agenda is we have to have Commissioner Powell take the gavel. She's going to discuss some information items and some discussion items that relate to the policy committee. Commissioner Powell?
Thank you very much. We have quite a list of policies that are up for discussion. Rahima is putting up a slide so that we can essentially, after this one, we're going to kind of assembly line it. But the first policy that is going through its information item, or first reading, as it were, is the drug-free workplace policy. And so I'm just going to pause for a moment and ask if there are any discussion, any comments anyone wants to make, or questions. And I'm watching for hands. This we have seen this before. Seeing no hands, we'll move on to what we call the Part 1 Special Education bundle of policies. I think Rahima's going to put up the slide. Starting with policy 4200, which is essentially our district plan for special education. Significant, I'm sorry. Are there any questions or concerns about this? These are all policies that we received a presentation on at our last policy meeting. Seeing no hands. The next policy up for discussion is the parent involvement of parents of children with disabilities, policy 4201. Are there any questions or comments about this policy?
Commissioner Powell?
Yes.
I have just a comment. Thank you. I just wanted to share that this particular policy is of note, as this directly correlates to work that we are endeavoring to do in our strategic plan. So the edits and the modifications made align to work that we've outlined that we aspire to do. So I just wanted to make a note of it.
Thank you. I'm sure our viewing audience appreciates hearing something about what these are intending to do. I see no hands, so I'm going to move on to policy 4202, students with disabilities. And I remind you again, we did receive a summary of the major changes at our last policy meeting. I see no hands. So moving on to policy 4203, preschool special education program. Any concerns, questions, comments? Seeing no hands, I move on to policy 4204, allocation of space for special education programs. Comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, I move on to policy 4207, appointment and training of CSE members. This would be to ensure that each of our CSE meetings is composed of all the people required by state law and presumably therefore the right people to make assessments on the student's placement. Seeing no hands, I move on to our part 2. Special ed part 2 was presented to us on the same day as part 1. They went through subcommittee in batches, but they ended up coming through policy committee at the same time. So policy 4208, appointment and training of CPSE members.
Commissioner Powell?
Yes.
Commissioner Adams has his hand up.
Yes, Commissioner Adams.
I was just wondering, they have a group of parents because CPAC, there's all their kids are
Right.
in the category. And I was wondering if they have had a chance to see all of this, or is this the first presentation? Will they get a chance to see it? Will they get a chance to weigh in? That's my question.
That's a great question, Commissioner Adams. There was a representative of CPAC at the subcommittee meetings where each of these policies was discussed in detail. And after each of these batches went through its first pass in subcommittee, the bundle was reviewed by CPAC as a whole and given 30 days to comment on, as well as the cabinet. So the bundle went in 2 different directions after it left subcommittee. Feedback was returned to us in subcommittee, given consideration, and then it was only after it went through those steps that it came to the full board as a policy committee of the whole. Okay. Any other questions? Any questions specific to 4208? Seeing none, move on to policy 4209, development and provisions of student individualized education programs, IEPs. Questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, I move on to policy 4210, implementation of IEPs. I'm checking for comments, hands, no hands. Our next policy is 4211, least restrictive environment. I see no hands. The next policy, 4212, grouping by similarity of needs. I see no hands. The next policy, 4213, extended school year services. I see no hands. Declassification of students with disabilities, 4214. I see no hands. Policy 4215, transition services. And I see no hands. I do want to give a shout out to Vice President Elliott, who attended many, if not all, of the subcommittee meetings for special education. And that completes the first reading or the information item step for special education policies. I apologize for the assembly line fashion, but there are just so many that we would be here all night if we didn't rush things along. The next round of the second reading or discussion item, we have two policies. The policy management policy 2410. This merges three policies together, all governing how we do this. And we're transitioning from discussion item, information item, and action item to first, second, and third readings. That's the biggest change. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, we'll move on to our last policy for its second reading or discussion item, the grants award notice policy, policy number 6256. This is a new policy. Some changes were introduced from its original proposed policy to the policy committee, and you'll see that the wording changes on the last bullet were in an effort to make it more readily understood. The last bullet reads, responsible staff or department for oversight of program management. In other words, identifying who is the beneficiary of the grant. I see no questions or hands. So that completes our readings of the policies that are in the queue. Mr. President, I relinquish the floor.
Thank you, Chairperson Powell. Next item on our agenda is, we just have to take care of some house cleaning here. Commissioner Malloy had some minutes that had to be approved, and we're going to do that at this time. Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you. This will be very, very quick. I just need a motion to approve the minutes from our April 6th governance meeting. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Thank you.
Second.
I heard a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And I pass the gavel back to President White.
Well, I want to tell you all that thanks to the good work of Commissioner Malloy and Commissioner Powell, we are on schedule. It is now 5:52. Commissioner Vice President Elliott, you better watch out because your colleagues are doing their thing. But let's see what you can do now. You have the gavel, Madam Vice President. It is your meeting.
Thank you, President White, and good evening to our audience. Good evening to our superintendent and her staff, and good evening, my colleagues, commissioners. The ESA committee is now convened, and we will have another report on student attendance from Betsy Hopper. Betsy?
Good evening, Commissioners and Superintendent Dr. Myers-Small. In our presentation preview meeting, Commissioner Elliott asked for some specific information regarding attendance vocabulary and procedures. To meet that request, I'm creating an attendance handbook. Oops, the videos, okay. I am creating an attendance handbook for the board and offering to present professional development to the board on this topic at a future date. Tonight, I will share how the attendance department is collaborating with community schools to improve chronic absence. I will introduce you to the Director of Community Schools, Kelly Briggs, as well as an administrative intern, Caitlin Law, who has a particular interest in chronic absenteeism research and is asked to participate in tonight's presentations as one of her projects. The focus tonight will be how we are re-engaging students in Tier 3 of our multi-tiered system supports and interventions. As there is much to cover, including a student video clip, I would like to ask you to reserve your questions and comments until the end of the presentation. I turn this presentation over now to Ms. Caitlin Law.
Hi, thank you Commissioners, Dr. Myers-Small and her team, and Ms. Hoffer for allowing me to present tonight. The work to reduce chronic absenteeism rates and improve student engagement in school is closely aligned with the RCSD strategic plan. Tonight, you will see how central office departments are collaborating to lead change throughout the district, and more importantly, how a student is leading by example at Leadership Academy for Young Men by engaging and lifting up his peers in discussions about absenteeism. Next slide. Oh, this is the right slide. Actually, a previous slide. You already gone ahead. Chronic absenteeism is the metric in which the state and federal government use to measure how successful a school is in regards to student attendance. On the student level, chronic absenteeism means a student has missed 10% of the enrolled school days. At the end of the school year, any student who has missed 18 days or more for excused or unexcused reasons is considered to be chronically absent. Reducing chronic absence fits nicely in our multi-tiered systems of supports that are being successfully implemented by school districts across the US to reduce chronic absenteeism. Our attendance teams here in RCSD are implementing strategies and interventions based on absenteeism rate data and where our scholars fall in the tiers in order to improve our overall attendance rates. In our multi-tiered system, Tier 1 represent universal strategies to encourage good attendance for all students by providing clear communication about schedules, expectations with attending school, community building for a sense of belonging, connection, and celebration and recognition of good and improved attendance, and personalized outreach for students who are absent. Tier 2 provides early intervention for scholars who need more support to avoid chronic absence, like virtual and in-person home visits, individual attendance plans, and mentoring opportunities. Tier 3 offers intensive support for scholars facing the greatest challenges with getting to school. Interventions include strategies like asset mapping, intensive outreach for our families, and working with community partners that support child welfare. Ms. Kelly Briggs, who is our Director of Community Schools, will be going over asset mapping and how it has directly benefited and improved attendance for our Tier 3 scholars here in the Rochester City School District. Thank you so much, and back to Betsy.
Thank you, Ms. Law. This chart shows the number and percentages of students in each of the categories that Ms. Law just talked about. Tier 3 is the category of students identified as being severely chronic and chronically absent. As of April 30th, 2021, these students had missed 14 or more days this school year. Each school attendance team has identified students that have between 14 and 17 days of absence and have created action plans to help these students transition back to Tier 2. This slide refers to the goals set by our superintendent in her strategic plan. The goal for grades 1 through 8 is 23% or less chronic absence school-wide. The goal for grades 9 through 12 is 40% or less school-wide chronic absenteeism. On April 30th, 2021, the actual chronic absenteeism rate for elementary grades is higher than the goal. On the other hand, it appears that grades 9 through 12 are on track for meeting the superintendent's goal this year. As I reported back to you in March, the attendance department is working closely with community schools and My Brother's Keeper initiative. One of the metrics for all schools' accountability is chronic absenteeism. Community schools consist of both receivership schools and non-receivership schools. However, re-engaging students is one way to improve attendance, academic performance, and family engagement. To speak about how we are working to re-engage Tier 3 students, please meet Ms. Kelly Briggs, the Director of Community Schools.
Thank you, Betsy. I'd like to first thank the principal of Leadership Academy for Young Men, Dr. Jajinga St. Louis, and my site coordinator, Vaughn Collins at Leadership. He's leading the work at the school. I'm excited to talk to you about our asset mapping by zip codes initiative. It's a Tier 3 intervention. And so I just want to talk about two of the steps that we take when we do this intervention. Number one, we group students by zip codes. And number two, we complete a zip codes asset mapping protocol. And I have an example of the document here that I'd just like to show you briefly. So this is an example of how we do the attendance grouping by zip codes. What we found when we looked at data, you have a lot of kids who are in different zip codes. So we wanted to organize that. And we also have a map attached to every zip code where we can look up the student's address and see what assets are around there. And then we reach out to there. One of the main first things that we like to reach out to are our centers, and they've partnered with us as well too. On this team, we have a number of different community-based organizations, community leaders, government officials, and all kinds of partners that have already been working with the school and new partners. And the second step in this process is what we call a zip code asset mapping protocol. And that's where we as a team come together. And the awesome thing about having such a team with people with such depthness is that they are all attached to other resources that help us as we look at the best steps to reach our students and families. So we go through looking at the zip code and identifying where are the assets at, who are the leaders, who can we reach out to. Another part of this initiative, which is such awesome piece to it, is that when we do this asset mapping, we reach out to the people in the community and we ask them to accompany us when we do home visits. A lot of times our families, they love to see people that they know that are from their community. And so this is also a way for us to build partnerships with our communities and our families. A lot of times when we go out and we do these visits, we find out that it's more than just an attendance issue. We find out it's active family and community engagement. Some parents have needed jobs, some students needed a mentor, and that's what we do when we do this initiative. And also we celebrate the success of our students because that's why we're doing this, to re-engage. I am just happy and excited to tell you that Leadership Academy for Young Men, we just started this program the end of March, and 13 young men have been re-engaged in school. And one of the bright spots to this is our work with My Brother's Keeper. They are a current partner to Leadership Academy for Young Men. And as you see the student that's coming up, Mr. Ray Cassiano, this young man is dynamic. He is a dynamic leader there at the school. And he went out with several other students a couple of weeks ago, My Brother's Keeper, and they went and they did an outreach where they did the home visits with us. So now on this team, we're going to be incorporating student leaders.
To the student and just tried to find out the reason, how come he was missing classes, he was absent from school, and he looked like a good kid. So we wanted to make sure he had all the necessities being in class every day. His Chromebook was broken. So we got to the bottom of it. We sent in the ticket to downtown to get him a new laptop. And now we make sure he's in school every day. That's only one kid. We reached the kid and we brought him back into school so he can feel the school life. The second kid's house he went to, he was just coming home. We caught him right before he got into the door. It was funny. Yeah, so we spoke to the mom, we spoke to him, and we asked what was the problem? How come all teenagers and kids now, the first thing they go to is, oh, I don't got my laptop, but the first thing they had in the hand was the controller. So we broke the ice by using games, using the game system, using PlayStation X as, look, we're your brothers. We're not here to say you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you're doing this wrong. We're here to say, hey, we got your back. So we helped the mom did the same thing as the last student, make sure he had his charger, his laptop, so he can come in. We talked to him about coming back into school because now we're hybrid. We come in Thursdays and Fridays and have a nice time with all the teachers and have a nice time with the students as well, my fellow brothers. The third kid, I completely, it touched me and I had to step up hey, I got you. So according to the mom, a few days ago, the house next door to him, his house got shot up and the mom's car got shot too. So she was scared to let her son go to 17 school, which is near my house, to play basketball with other kids. She was scared for her son to come outside. And for a mother to feel that, because that's what my mom went through when I was smaller, for her child not to be able to go outside, it's hard for a mom to say that, I fear for my son. So I gave the mother a sense of hope. I gave the mom a sense of, you're not alone. Everyone goes through this struggle. I took the mom's number and I connected with the son. We connected with the son like this. We all connected quickly. Now with this student, it's just hard for him. It's just hard for students to do the online work now. Everyone's so used to being in class. Everyone's used to one-on-one teacher help, everybody's used to sitting in a desk. And the online, I cannot lie, I'm a senior, but it is difficult at times. So we understood, we found out that he came back hybrid the same day. The same day we went to go visit him, that was his first day back into school.
Right. And again, that's Ray Castellano. He's one of the awesome leaders at Leadership Academy for Young Men. We also want to continue this work and start to develop other young men and young ladies to be leaders in their schools.
Thank you,
Now
Ms.
back to
Briggs,
Betsy.
for sharing
You're
this
welcome.
information. Thank you, Ms. Briggs, for sharing this information. I also want to thank my brother's keeper fellow, Ray Castellano, for sharing his experiences and for doing this work. Your words are truly inspirational. Tonight, we showcase the work that's being done by the amazing team at Leadership Academy for Young Men. But I want to let you know that reviewing attendance data, creating action plans for students, and re-engaging students is the daily work of all of our attendance teams throughout the district. The work of the Community School Task Force is enriching our work to re-engage students and families in tangible and measurable ways. This last slide sums up how the attendance department is working with internal and external partners to build capacity. Much of the work that has been done already lays the foundation for the work that there is still to do. I look forward to further collaboration to provide a list of assets for all zip codes while we work with families and neighborhoods to meet the attendance challenges and share this information with all the attendance team. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and I would be happy to answer any questions or hear your comments.
Raheem, we'll go back to that slide where there is the numbers of the absentee rate. So we're saying that we have, is this for this year? We have 7,500 students whose absentee rate is 20% or greater.
That's as of April 30th. That's the number of students that have missed 20% of the school year or more, yes.
Which is in terms of how many days?
143, I think, was April 30th. So 14 days or more, or actually for 20%, it would be 28 days.
Okay, so what was the number from last year?
I can get that information to you. I don't have it off the top of my head right now.
So we've got about 11,000 of our students who have 10% or greater absentee rate.
So the information, yeah, correct. And the information I can get to you would be based on attendance as of March 13th, because we don't have attendance for May last year, but I can send you that information.
Meaning about 45% of our students are chronically absent.
Mm-hmm.
I just believe that we've got to have more energy in this. This is a serious issue that we don't seem to be able to address with the kind of energy I think we need to be addressing. Now, this year is probably a different kind of year, but since I've been on this board, we've had issues with chronic absenteeism, and it just seems as if, oh well, they're not here. And I guess I'd like for there to be more energy, and that's a conversation I don't need to have with you, Betsy. That's a conversation with the superintendent. So, but this is horrible. And I'll just say that, Dr. Jallo, I see your hand is raised.
I wanted to ask, are these numbers going up, or are they going down, or are they staying the same? Because these numbers from where I'm sitting have looked pretty much the same since I got here. So I'm just wondering if you're seeing improvement or not. And well, I'll start with that, because we're just seeing these numbers in isolation and we don't know whether it's going up or down.
Right, so I review each school's chronic absenteeism rate with them when I meet with them weekly. I have been looking at the chronic absent numbers, those 3,000 kids, to look to see how many of them, if they've missed 10 to 19%, how many have missed 14 days to 25 days. There's about 400 or 500 kids who are in that category that if they don't get any more absences, they would come off that chronic absenteeism list. And that is who we're targeting to work with to reduce the chronic absenteeism rate.
I think I don't see on my screen all of the hands. So I think I saw Commissioner LeBron, And I think I also saw Commissioner Malloy. Commissioner LeBron.
Vice President Elliott, I think actually Commissioner Malloy had her hand up first, but it's up to you how you want to keep it moving.
Yeah. Just go ahead, because I can't see any other hands. Commissioner Commissioner Malloy, if your hand was up first, go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you. I was going to just defer to just pass it to LeBron, but that's fine. I just wanted to say thank you so much to the team that has been doing this work. It looks like there are some real concrete steps being taken just to address our chronic absenteeism, and especially with the tier 3 interventions. I'm really impressed by the asset mapping. So kudos to Kelly Briggs, kudos to Caitlin and to you, Ms. Hoffer. Just being able to track this by zip code is really valuable for our district. And I was really impressed by the young man who spoke. Just those peer-to-peer supports are really critical in keeping kids engaged in school. And so with the My Brother's Keeper program, I'm very impressed by the work that you're doing. And I think it's a reminder to us all how critical that program is, and that how important that partnership is with our school district. And I certainly am looking forward to seeing more results and more comparisons. Certainly we're in a pandemic right now, so those numbers might be a bit off. But I am interested in seeing those numbers improve over time. So thank you so much for your work that you've been doing.
Thank you very much. Kelly, could you move to the last slide, please? One of the things I wanted to mention on there is with the success that we've seen at Leadership Academy with the young men reaching out, and they are going with adults, they're not going by themselves, they're going with representatives. I do think that that's a real opportunity for us to collaborate and to, grow some leadership skills in our students, and that sense of peer tutoring, I think, could really be key to making a change. Thank you, Commissioner Malloy.
Sorry.
Did somebody else want to add something?
I just wanted to add one other piece to that.
Who's speaking? Because I can't see you.
Kelly Briggs.
Okay.
Community Schools. I wanted to also add one of the things that me and Betsy noticed as we were looking at this and at leadership with Von Collins, the coordinator, is that doing this work is also building those partnerships with our families and our students in the community, because it's showing people how, we normally see the store owner, the business owner, but the business owner, the store owner, all the leaders in the community are coming together to help us with our attendance challenge. So it's like not just a district, but the whole community is engaging with this to help re-engage our students.
And we're
Commissioner LeBron? Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, I think Betty was trying to say something. I don't know if she wants to finish that point.
I was just going to say, and we are working with families more so than individual students. One of the advantages of Zooming into attendance meetings all day long throughout the district is sometimes we hear the same families are having concerns at 3 or 4 different schools. And so we're taking a family approach rather than 3 or 4 schools trying to try different approaches with one family. And I think that's been very beneficial too. Catholic Family Center has been very helpful with their preventative services in that as well. Thank you.
Commissioner LeBron?
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. And hopefully my internet doesn't break up because it's a little spotty on the district laptop, actually. So a couple of things. One, I want to spotlight Ray, the student that was shown, is actually a restorative practice student that went through extensive training for over a couple of years now in the district, and has been a student, really a model student since going through that training, who then trained other students on the restorative practice work. So I do want to just spotlight that, because there's some cross connections of like our students, and obviously I know that he is involved now with My Brother's Keeper, and then he's from leadership, but he started off as a restorative practice student, and is an amazing young man. He spoke 2 years ago at the larger conference. So I'm glad to see him still involved and active in all of this work. I do have some concerns, and I do share with Dr. Jallo that those numbers have not really changed since she's gotten here, but they also haven't really moved the needle since I've gotten here. And just figuring out a more district-wide approach, because from what I'm gathering from this presentation, there's an approach for the community schools, which I will say I fully support Kelly. I have no doubt that under her leadership that the community schools and the model that she has implemented will be successful. My concern is for all the other schools that don't get the benefits of Kelly's leadership or model under the community school model. And what are we doing in those schools to address the absenteeism? And then I also just did some quick calculations. And so Commissioner Elliott said the 30, and I'm assuming she added the 30% and the 14% of chronic absenteeism for the 44%. But if you look at that chart and you go back to all the 3 tiers of what is considered absenteeism for the district at different levels, that's 57% of the students. And when you look at the actual raw data of those numbers, we're talking about more than half of our students are technically not attending or missing or have chronic absenteeism. And we also know that students who are not present or chronically absent, also there's some academic issues, right? You have to be in school to learn, you have to be here to get the information and move forward. And so Betty and Caitlin and Kelly, I second Commissioner Vice President Elliott's comments and her concerns that this is really more addressed to the superintendent and her team, because this is a district-wide issue. And I wholeheartedly appreciate, again, all of the work that you are doing intentionally with partnerships to reach our families in the community school model. But my concern is all the other students and all the other schools and what is being done there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We actually have already approached several other non-community schools, such as 54, and there was another one, Kelly, we've met with a couple other ones just this month.
Yes.
To share this work, to try to teach them how to do this work themselves, as well as take what we've learned, because we don't need everybody doing asset mapping for the whole district 60 times, right? So we're trying to make it more efficient, but letting them know we're finding out where the assets are in 14621, and we're establishing partnerships, and your students at for example, 54 may have siblings at Franklin, and we can work with the whole family. So we are spreading this to other schools to give them ideas of ways that they can connect with the community and help our students and our families. I think there was something else you said I wanted to address, but you know, all of this is to do with changing our culture, and that takes time. I believe that those universal things of wanting students to feel welcome at school, families to feel supported, all of those things are really have been stronger during the pandemic. I think our families are more confident and know how much we care about them. I believe we're going to see a difference when we come back 100%, because I can tell you, traveling to attendance meetings, our staff knows our kids and knows our families and are working hard to make those connections with them. I wish the data showed it right now. All the work that's being put into it, it's anecdotal at best right now, but I do believe that it's having a big effect, and it's going to change our culture and how we approach absenteeism, supports, engagement, involving families.
Commissioner Vice President Elliott, can I just do a quick follow-up to what she just said about the anecdotal data?
Yes.
I'm going to encourage you to capture that too, because I do agree that sometimes in this kind of line of work of direct service, that the data is not going to show in a quantitative number at this very moment, but capturing that data point as well, I think is going to be equally just important to share those stories that you're mentioning in a different way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Klingscale, our parent rep. Ms. Cleanscale? All right, let's go to Commissioner Clark.
Thank you, Vice President. I just wanted to kind of expand on what you've initially said, because this is really a massive problem that we have with 44% of our students chronically absent. And I also want to applaud the work that the team has done. I think it's outstanding work, and the fact that you went out and you looked at best practices and you've incorporated them. But I also feel that this needs to be district-wide, and in order to do that, it's more of a question to the superintendent that we need a massive investment, in addition to my brother's keeper and the work that's being done. And hopefully with some of the stimulus funds that are coming in, we will be able to redirect some of those funds so that we can make the type of investments that's needed in order to aggressively attack this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Powell?
Thank you. A couple of folks have said that that this was a problem. Well, Dr. Jala said it's been a problem as long as she's been here. If we were to look at that chart again of the students' attendance versus district goals, the elementary school attendance issue seems to be much worse now, presumptively because of the pandemic, than it ever was historically. I mean, our average daily attendance in elementary levels hovered around the 90% range, maybe 92%, throughout the year, every year for many years. It was usually the secondary education where we had trouble meeting attendance goals, and we can't have 40. I mean, if we had average daily attendance of 10%, we wouldn't be having 45% chronic absences. I guess it's important to put these numbers in perspective given the COVID environment. My question is, comment was made that, that looking at the subset of the 10 to 20% absences that could be recovered, that is to say, if their attendance turned around today, they would not be listed as chronically absent. So my question is, when did that work start? I would hope it started well before March. Yeah. And in addition, I would hope that we're not giving up on students after they pass into that window where we know they're going to be listed as chronically absent no matter what we do. I hope that we're not giving up on them and writing them off.
No. So the tier 3 kids are the kids who do have 20% or more. It probably will be hard for them to make up any. If they came the rest of the school year, they probably have enough absences so far that they're labeled chronically absent. However, if we can instill habits in them now, remove the obstacles that are there right now, and get them ready for this fall, we're in better shape, and they will have a much better year next year. The attendance teams look at the chronic absentee data every week, and we look to, and that work has been going on all year long. We also have something that I think is helping our students, because they can do some work offline and get credit for being present async. That gives them an opportunity also to recover those days and get off the chronic absenteeism list. So that is the strategy right now, to make sure that those students have all the support that they need so that they don't miss any more days. And if they have, that they have the opportunity to make up work to be counted present async and get off that list.
Thank you.
Yes.
President White?
Yes, thank you, Vice President Elliott. You know, the other day I remarked that all of our chairs are working especially hard. I want to thank you for bringing this issue up because it is obviously an issue of immense importance. If children aren't in their seats, they can't learn. To Ms. Hoffer, Ms. Briggs, and to Principal St. Louis, thank you for your work. But I think a number of people have made the legitimate point that while this is good work, it's only in 1 or 2 schools. We have a system-wide problem, and it has to be addressed. And in that regard, I would like to pose 2 questions to go into the question log, and I'm sure they've been in there before. I just want the record to be clear. For many years, prior superintendents have worked on a system-wide basis to address this problem. And that has been raised by my colleagues today. What is the system-wide solution? You all may recall that Dr. Vargas engaged heavily in this issue. He not only worked to have staff deployed into the neighborhoods to directly identify students who were missing district-wide, but he also engaged the services of our communications department to come up with a very extensive, very hard-hitting PR campaign. I didn't necessarily agree with the content of it. I thought graphically something that it was about drowning, and I didn't particularly like that image, but that is just, it should be clear that he made a point of trying to address the district's attendance problem district-wide. And then you all, so my first question to question log would be, and we've got to constantly think about best practices. What was the impact, if any, of that effort that he put in? We spent lots of money on ad time. We spent lots of staff time directly identifying. I went to a couple of those meetings, and like many of my colleagues in the district, we literally went out and knocked on doors. It was an organized effort to identify those students that are in need. Now, Ms. Briggs and Ms. Hoffer, you're doing something different, which Commissioner Malloy, I think, correctly applauded, which is the asset mapping. It's one thing to identify what the problem is, but you got to be able to tell people where they go for help. So I think that is an added value. But I want to know what, if anything, because we can't be just reinventing the wheel every time we identify the same problem over and over again. Please tell me what, if anything, was the result of that very extensive resource deployed effort that Dr. Vargas engaged in. Somebody should be able to research that and tell us. Because if it was good, just because it doesn't exist anymore, you all know, doesn't mean that it was bad. That's not how this district operates. So please, could someone tell me what the impact of that, and not tonight. And then, although for some, she wasn't the most popular superintendent, let's let the record be clear. Barbara Dean Williams spent a lot of money on deploying staff, hiring staff and deploying them out into the community specifically for the purpose of attendance. You all remember we had that young man die, and Barbara's response to that was, let's see what we can do to make sure that doesn't happen again. She hired, I don't bet, Elizabeth, you may know, 25 parent, and I know Ricardo, I think Ricardo, I hope I'm not misquoting you, but you were very much in support of those parents. And I think there was data that suggested that what they were doing was working. But Elizabeth, you correct me if I'm wrong, but they're all gone now.
I have 4 left.
4 left. And so the question has to be asked. It's a tough question. It's a very tough question, but the question has to be asked, to what extent did those 25 people have an impact on our attendance rate? Are they gone because it did not work? I'm kind of doubtful of that. I think I heard people say there was evidence, certainly anecdotal and otherwise, that it was working. So if we got rid of them because of money, we ought to really be thinking about that. Everybody's saying, well, what's the system-wide problem? It looks like, from what I hear, and I see Elizabeth sort of shaking her head, that, and I know I heard other people say it, that what they were doing was working. So Commissioner Clark says, hey, we got this money coming. Everybody's talking about downsizing the district, right-sizing the district. Well, let us not forget, we have to invest what works for our children. And we got to drop this downsizing language when we have evidence that an investment works for our kids. My suspicion is, and you all say, well, why is it getting so uptight about this? Because, as Vice President Elliott says, this is an issue that's of utmost importance. If we have evidence that something is working and we had 25, now we have 4. We have to ask ourselves, why did that happen? Did it happen because it wasn't a good investment, or did it happen because people were saying we need to downsize this district, we need to right-size our budget? What is the long-term cost of saving money but losing children? That's what's happening. So again, for the question log, to make it very practical, someone tell me and my colleagues whether there was any evidence that the systemic solution regarding attendance was working when Barbara Dean Williams hired 25 attendance representatives. And if it wasn't working, we know why it's gone. But if it was working, why is it not still in existence? And the answer should not be because we don't have money, because I know there's not a person in this room who does not believe our children are worth every dollar to keep them in their seats and off those streets.
Thank you, President White. And I'll just close by saying, it just, and I'm just going to go straight on my feelings. It just seems to me that there, and this is, I've been around here a long time. Question becomes, do we really care whether these students are in class or not? That's just where I am. And that's my frustration level. Do we really care that the students in the Rochester City School District are in these seats? If this were out in the suburbs, you don't have this kind of issue out in the suburbs. And so it just seemed, or not to the extent, let me just say. So it's just feelings that it just seems to me that we're not caring whether these kids are in the class or not. Commissioner Powell?
Primarily, I raised my hand because I see that our parent rep's hand is up. I don't know if.
No, I've even called her. I can't get her. So, yeah. All right. So thank you all, Betsy, and your team for presenting this. Let's do it with a lot of care. Let's do it as if it's our children who are out of these classrooms, that we're not having students who are on the streets who are getting into these disproportionate social ills that cause more harm in our community because they haven't been in the classroom being educated and being productive citizens of society. That's huge for me. And I'm hoping that it is huge for the people in our district. So Thank you very much.
And I think what I'll try to do is tape an attendance meeting, or if any of you would like to join me at an attendance meeting, it'll really show through the extent that the teams are working on re-engaging these students and families and working hard for exactly those reasons, so that our kids can perform academically better as well.
And let me also end by saying, I know this is difficult work. This is difficult work. It's not easy. And so if you don't have that kind of capacity with the understanding that this work is difficult, you're going to fail. Let me just say
Cynthia,
that.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
Well, first of all, in light of the fact that we have over 50% of our students being absent, I do remember a couple of months back, we had a presentation on summer school where we were going to only employ 750 students. So my question is, in light of what we see now, with over 50% lack of attendance, knowing that that's almost half of our kids that are not going to pass, what are we doing moving forward? The second thing I have to say, I've been on y'all meetings for a long time. And the one thing that I know is that y'all discuss stuff extensively. I never see anything moving the issue forward. I hear a lot of conversation, no action. So now I'm asking, as a parent, with over how many kids we got in our district, 30,000, how could we consciously only offer 750 seats over the summer? That's my question.
Is there somebody on who could answer about summer school? I'm not up to date with that information.
Yeah. We will put that question in the question log for the superintendent to respond to.
Well, I'd like to thank Kelly and Caitlin for presenting with me this evening, and I do have your answer for you, President White. It'll be in the log, and I look forward to further discussions. And I just want you to know we do care about having our kids in school every minute, and every minute matters. So thank you for everything.
Thank you. So Rahima, would you also put in the question log the number of absentees that we had from last year and comparing that to this year? We may have had that data, but if I can see that data from last year and from the last 2 school years, if we can have that data. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the State Monitor Academic Plan update. And this is in reference, it aligns with the agenda for the evening around special education. So her recommendation, which is number 7 under table 13, each functional role and required activities that must be performed should be documented and enforced in the special education and supervisors user manuals. So let me just ask Desiree or her team, do we at this point, do we have the special education users manual in place? And that should have been completed in 2020. Do we have that?
So the district plan we submitted outlines the process and procedures that was approved by the board on February 25th. But in addition to that, there are several manuals that assist our staff in completing their process and duties and roles, including a frontline anniversary date document that our staff use to help them complete their IEPs. We also have a clerical handbook. We have our related service providers have user manuals, and we continue to revise them. There were several that had to be revised, and I have had meetings with Dr. Jallo and my team. We plan to put a very comprehensive one-spot electronic document that has all of these manuals in one spot, and they will be ready to go by July 1st or at the latest, the beginning of the school year.
So has that been, is that a part of, let me just ask maybe the superintendent, is that a part of the state monitor's report? Because it would seem to me that this answer is no. No. Right? Because I'm reading clearly define and document roles, responsibilities, and deliverables for each position in special education shall be included in a special education user's manual. So to me, I need a yes or no answer. Is that yes or is that no? Because all of these other manuals may have been available prior to the state monitor's tenure here. So to clarify it for me, that's what I need to know. Do we have those? Do we have it or do we not? And did the state monitor okay that we can delay this until July 1?
So I've submitted an executive summary to Dr. Jallo. We have been meeting with her on a regular basis. And at this point, between the district plan that outlines many of the pieces, and then all of the other, it's not in one spot, but we have user manuals for all of our staff.
So is that how you're documenting it to the state monitor?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. So then number 2, by December 31st, any questions? Let me just ask that first of all. And I'm only seeing part of a screen. So any questions with regard to evidence of implementation number 1? Okay. Thank you. Number 2, by December 31st, 2020, specifically identify roles and responsibilities for support staff, teachers, principals, specialized service administrators, evaluators, and directors in the Special Services Supervisors Manual. Is that done?
We have roles and responsibility charts that have tell our staff what responsibilities they have. So I have that, and I have reviewed that with our team and with Dr. Jallo, and hopefully if she needs a copy of all of those documents, we've sent those. So I am hoping that that is also a yes.
But she's recommending that it is in a Special Services Supervisors Manual. Do
This
we
is the
have it?
same, yeah.
We do?
A supervisor's manual, I would say we have more work to do on a supervisor's manual.
Okay, the special services supervisors manual. So
But
we don't have, go ahead.
Our associate directors have a very extensive, so they are supervisors and they are running our meetings. They have a very comprehensive guidance document, and they also have a very strong, we have an entire spot in Google Docs where all of their information, all that they need is there. Now, if we talk about our directors, that's really part of their roles and responsibilities that are led and guided by myself and the cabinet, and what we have to do is as to help special education move forward. So not one specifically for our directors, but our associate directors certainly have, definitely have manuals.
So is that what you responded to again, is that the response that you gave to the state monitor?
Yes, we have reviewed these deliverables with the state monitor, and from what I have been she shared with us that we're in a good standing.
Okay.
Vice President Elliott. Oh,
Dr.
I was going to
Jallo?
say Daphne.
Dr. Jallo?
Okay. Oh, so what I wanted to say about special ed in particular is because special ed has so many deliverables, and because special ed is operating under a consent decree, under advisement from my colleagues at SED, I have offered to meet on a regular basis with Ms. Richmond and her entire team to go line by line and document by document and have regular, I think we said bi-weekly meetings to discuss what's going on and discuss these items. To be honest with you, on this item number 2, the area of greatest concern when this was written and continues to be of concern are the principals. That school leaders understand special ed law, understand instructional practices that support students with IEPs. So that was still an area of concern or area for growth, right? But everything else was documented and shared. My only other concern, and we have set up a system to address that, is that it wasn't done by the date as specified in the original document. But
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Jallo. I'm sorry.
I believe we've worked this out. I've tried to share with administration that if you ask for a modification, it is to be done before the due date. And I think we had a little rough start in that particular area. But I think administration understands that now, that they make a request for a modification, either on date or on the content of the recommendation. We have a discussion and we come to an agreement. But in terms of number 1 and number 2, I feel that enough documentation through actual artifacts and through meetings supports the good standing in those 2 recommendations, with the underscoring the part about the principal school leaders.
Right. Dr. Jallo, I think in terms of your evidence of recommendation, what's important here, at least in my mind, is that when you use the term special education user's manual, and the reason I think that the manual is important because then we have some excuse me, some legacy documents that we can go back to, and something written down. And unfortunately, what has happened is when you have such a high turnover as we have in our district, there has not been, or it's very little documentation of what has been done. And so that's why I've been focused on the language around users manuals, because if the team who are now in place are no longer around, the next group of the next team can pick up that manual and go from there. So that's why I'm really harboring on the fact that we need to have a manual. So
I appreciate that, and I am 100% in agreement. It's not just special ed; it's throughout the system, or just documenting. What's you'll see throughout this document: SOP, standard operating procedures. With the standard operating procedures, the plans ask for those in every department to make sure that there is an artifact that tells people what to do when in doubt. What procedures are to be followed, who reports to who's accountable for what. And so it's not just special ed, it is every department actually. They don't call it the same thing, but it satisfies the same intent in terms of the information that they have gathered so that one can go to one place and find that information as to who is the organizational structure and who's responsible for what duties and responsibilities.
right. I just think that's critical for us to have, and we've always had to seemingly start over because there has not been the kind of documentation that our departments have needed in order to move to be more efficient in those roles. So
you also need it for evaluation. I mean, how do you evaluate people if you don't know what they're supposed to be doing?
That's right.
So it has many purposes.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
So I will add that I noticed that as well as I came into the district, and one of the first big projects was the district plan, which we didn't have. Starting in October and then having these due in December, the district plan was the first thing. But my team recognizes that we need to make sure everyone in our department knows their role and their process, but that is a massive project. And we are picking away at it daily. We're revising, and we did have a special education handbook. I found it in our website. It was very outdated. So our team, like I said, is continuously working, and our frontline team, our associate director of compliance, the 4 directors were all working on updating all of these manuals, process and procedures. And I do also agree with Dr. Jallo about the need to address our roles and our collaboration with principals.
Yeah, because the issue for me too is that, and this is just not for special education, but for all the departments, including the board, that we are not disrespecting the plan that the state monitor has recommended to us. That's huge. The state has, she's here on behalf of the state, and we need to make sure that what she has recommended, that we are adhering to it. So that's why I'm so hard on this, that we've got to make sure that we are on it. So for the last one, Desiree, under number 7.
Vice President Elliott?
Yes.
Commissioner Malloy and Commissioner Powell.
Okay, Commissioner Malloy, I can't see the screen, so thank you. Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you very much. Just in terms of meeting the building level needs, perhaps, for these recommendations, just as a board member would love to make sure that, that our building principals have the support that they need to meet the state monitor's recommendations. I think that so much of this is a full-time job, just keeping track of everything. And I know it's the associate directors who are the ones doing this work. So whatever supports that we can put in place for our building principals, I would love to see investment there. Thank you.
Commissioner Powell?
Thank you. I agree with Ms. Richmond that it is a monumental job to put together SOPs from scratch. And that's the problem, is that it has to be done from scratch. That after all of the years of me saying, you need to have the football, you need to write down what you're doing so that the next person can pick up where you left off. It isn't really job security to have secret knowledge that nobody else knows. and a healthy organization has those processes in place so that everyone can then have a path to rise to the next level and not have to reinvent their job. You know, when they get promoted, that they have something to look at that has all of the history of, yeah, we've been down this road before and this is what we did. It might not be right, but if it's been tried before, at least you have, something to weigh against whether the next effort is to repeat that or to try something new. So I just want to say thank you to you, Ms. Richmond, for the work you are doing. And thank you, Dr. Jallo, for holding their feet to the fire in a way that we as individual board members were not able to. I think that kind of covers all the bases.
Are there any other hands raised? Okay, thank you. So then, Desiree, can you tell me where we are with number 3 under evidence of implementation under the recommendation number 7?
So number 3, obviously this is our goal to make sure we have, and I'm the compliance piece relates to the manuals.
Mm-hmm.
We're working on, like I said, and I want to make sure I say this. There were manuals and process and procedures for everyone, but some of them have to be updated. They had to be updated, and that's where we are. We're going through that. I want to also make sure you understand that even though maybe some of these manuals are in process or completed, there are weekly meetings for our associate directors on compliance issues, processes, procedures. We have the regional partnership coming in, providing training every Wednesday. And our frontline team has clerical rounds with all of our clerical team to support them on a regular basis when issues come up. As you know, special education is ever changing. We're always dealing with some new process, procedure, or regulation change. So this is something that I've talked to the team, that these manuals and procedures have to be reviewed every summer to make sure that they are still in compliance and that we are providing our staff that run meetings and our teachers and our staff all the information that they need to deliver services to our students.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go down to recommendation number 8. Ensure the timely finalization of student IEPs after the CSE meeting. And the first, number 1 under evidence of implementation is develop standard deadlines for finalizing IEPs and establish procedures and designate responsibility for facilitating timely parent receipt in the user's manual and the supervisor's manual for special education by December 31st, 2020 and April 15th, 2021. Where are we on that?
So we have a very detailed compliance log for every single school. And on the compliance log, there's also a manual that goes with it. So it is not it's not called the user, the manual for supervisors, but it is a compliance log, and Dr. Jallo has reviewed that with us. It's very detailed, and it has every date. It has a student's name. It has the date when the annual review is due, or a reevaluation, or if it's an initial, when it's due, what's the 60-day clock, what paperwork has to be submitted, when evaluations should be received. It's very detailed, and actually, if you would like us, we can forward and share with you a blank log, so you see the categories that are in there, so you can see what we're doing to log our timelines. It is the expectation for all the associate directors, unless there's an extenuating circumstance, that IEPs are finalized within 48 hours. But we also tell them, do not finalize it if you need more information or you need to do a little research. Sometimes there's follow-up to CSE meetings, and we certainly do not want them finalizing documents that are not accurate or of high quality. Our associate directors, in addition, a follow-up to that is they meet have one-on-one meetings with our directors, have one-on-one meetings with our associate directors to check for compliance. So they pull IEPs and they check for the quality and the timeliness of those documents.
Okay, Dr. Jallo, you okay with that?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is develop a dashboard to allow supervisors to monitor the timeliness of completing IEPs. And I think you may have talked a little bit about that, Desiree. Yeah, the dashboard should also allow the reader to review benchmarks for student success and alert appropriate staff of upcoming meetings. And this should be completed by May 1st, 2021. Where are we with that, Desiree?
So we have been doing data polls every week on IEPs that are still outstanding or still need to be completed. They are reviewed with the associate directors and with the staff, and we're making sure we are holding people to the compliance log. That's our best tool that we have. I think that constant review by our directors, the constant message at every associate director meeting on Wednesdays where we're reviewing this data and we're looking for compliance issues and we're providing support. It's our people, right? We need to invest in our people and to provide them with the support and the coaching and answer their questions. They know we're all available. They email us regularly. And the directors are doing a fabulous job in meeting the needs and meeting with our associate directors and providing support.
Okay, thank you. Any questions out there? I just wanted to, because I can't see the screen. All right. And then the last one is begin processing the annual reviews of students in transition grades 5, 6, 8, and 9 shall be the first priority for the budget development process by April 15th. So where were we on that, Desiree?
Most, if not all, of those meetings have been completed. And we are using that data to plan for our budget. We've used them to plan for our budget and for our movement, right? And that's why Dr. Jallo has put that on there, right? You have to be able to plan for any of their movement as they transition maybe to another school.
Okay. All right. I don't see any questions, but Dr. Jallo, I'll just ask again, you're okay with the actions or the evidence that you've received from special education?
Yes, I am.
Regarding these recommendations?
Yes, I am.
All right. Thank you,
Just
Desiree.
for the knowledge of the board, where we should be reviewing January, February, items that we do January, February, and March, right? Those are the ones that we're holding ourselves responsible for during this quarterly report. I do like to look at April and May so that you don't forget and that you're trying to look back and figure out what you've done. So, but technically the reporting for this quarter is January, February, March, with an eye towards, of course, April and May because we are in May and shouldn't wait till the last minute to do these items.
Okay. Thank you very much, Desiree. Thank you so very much. And you're on next with regard to doing a special education continuum presentation. So Desiree.
Okay.
And thank you.
Rahima's going to pull up our PowerPoint, and tonight I have with me the 4 directors, Amy Tata, we have Melissa Pippin, Michelle Osgood, and our newest director, Jamie Lustig. So we're going to talk to you about our continuum of special education services because we wanted to highlight 2 of our programs that we think are notable and that we wanted to share with you tonight and celebrate some great things that we're doing. So we can go to the next slide. So our continuum of special education services ranges from related services all the way to our special class, but in addition, for our most vulnerable students, we also have home and hospital and also residential placements. Special education programs and services are determined by the needs of each individual student and is based on assessment data, classroom performance, and of course, present levels of performance. And that's where everything happens at the CSE meeting. They determine, based on the profile of the student, the related services, and whether they need a consultant teacher, resource rooms, integrated co-teaching, or special classes. Next slide. I wanted to just go over what a ratio of special education means. So as an example, if you see a 15-to-1, that means the first number is the number of students. The second number is the teacher. If there's a third number, when there's only one, and we are fortunate in this district, it means a teaching assistant. But if you see a ratio like 8-1-2, that's 8 students, 1 teacher, a teaching assistant, and a paraprofessional. So as you can see, when you go to 12-1-3, 6-1-4, 6-1-2, these are our students that have higher management needs or educational needs. Next, we're going to talk to, Amy Todd is going to talk to you about our ASD program, our autism spectrum disorder programs.
Good evening, everyone. I have a pleasure to spotlight some of the things that we're doing in our district for our students who are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So if you see it labeled as ASD anywhere, anything you read, I know we use lots of acronyms, but that's what ASD stands for, autism spectrum disorder. Overall, as a district, just wanted to bring you some data on where we are as a district with our students who have an educational classification of autism. We currently have over 550 students who do have that educational classification. The majority of our students with autism do receive their programming in district. However, we do have some students with that classification who are receiving their program in external programs and placements. Going back to in-district, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about on this slide, we do have across our district, I'm proud to say that we have 51 classes, special programs for students with autism across our districts. So 51 classes across 11 schools. Lots of great places to visit where you can see these 4 programs that I'm going to talk to you about. We do have, as Desiree was sharing, some different ratios. The first one, the most supportive class, is a class for 6 students, 1 teacher, and 4 support staff. That's for our students with the most significant need and the highest level of support, students with autism in that class. We also have a 6-1-2 class, which the ratio for the support staff decreases. This class, the students in this class have a moderate level of need, but are achieving those New York State Next Gen standards. We also have 2 more special class programs for students with autism. One is the social communication class, which is a mix of students who have the classification of autism and also some students who have other educational disabilities, other educational classifications. And in those classrooms, we are working with students who have a variety of skills, some with a higher skill set. And as we move that class to high school level, 7th grade and up, we do change that ratio to a 12-1-1 class. And that's our last bullet there, which means that the students are ready for that level of support and we're transitioning to less support staff in the classroom. Next slide, please. So in addition to our specialized programs that we have for students with autism across the district, we also have many students with the classification of autism who do participate in our general education programs. So in our ICT classes or in our CT programs. So for those students, they do get support from our autism consultation service, which is on their IEP, although it's not embedded in their special class program because they are in Gen Ed. We do provide that level of support with that for them. We support the classroom teacher with providing accommodations and modifications specific to autism, help increase awareness and understanding of autism specific needs and strategies, and also work with our related service staff who work with this special population of our students. Wanted to share with you that we do have an autism specific specialist team in our district. Our autism team is comprised of a multidisciplinary group of specialists who come from a variety of background and expertise. They work with all of our programs that I talked about in the last 2 slides, but they also work with our students in general ed population, as well as working with some of our external schools, charter schools, other external placements to help our staff to learn the strategies to work with our students with autism so that they can be successful in our educational programming that we have across the district. Next slide, please. Just wanted to spend a few minutes to talk a little bit about what you might see if you do go out and visit one of our ASD classrooms across the district. So there are several core components that you will see in the classrooms. This is a picture of one of our in-district classrooms right now. And you'll see it has our spacing, obviously for social distancing as well, in addition to the autism specific setup that we have. One of the biggest components in our programs that you will see across the district is the consistency with how we're implementing supports for our students with autism through the use of schedules and expectations. We do a lot of work with visuals for our students when we're teaching rituals and routines, when we're reviewing schedules, and we do a lot of teaching through social stories, a lot of learning through social stories as well. Next slide. These are some examples of this visual schedules that we do have going from left to right. The first one is just unpacking for the school day, what we do in the order of how we are preparing for learning for the day with our visual cues along with the text. We have our first then board, which is a strategy that we use for students for work completion and learning. We have a work schedule for work completion, and then a social story or a routine for learning. And this one's specific to story time. Just to walk you through some of the things you might see on the walls. 3 more components that are really key to our successful programs that we have. We do use a social curriculum in our ASD, or autism specific classrooms. So we work with the zones of regulation with our students and also work them through some social thinking activities so that they can transfer those skills when communicating with others in school and other settings. We are working with our teams. It's another role of our autism specialists to help increase the strategies that we use in our schools for students with disabilities, so that expertise comes into play. And one other thing that you may see if you are visiting a class is an opportunity for some embedded speech and language services in the classroom. Obviously, those are dependent on the need of the student, and if the IEP states that those services should be in the classroom or in the therapy room, but it is an opportunity for students to practice their social communication skills in the classroom setting. So all of those strategies that you heard, and regardless of the type of classroom that we have in our district, the vision of the team is that regardless of that ratio or program, we're increasing independence for our students, we're supporting transition of their skills across other settings, and then obviously moving towards least restrictive environment for our students, and then access to general education in the gen ed setting. So before go right back, I'm sorry, before we go to the next part, we're going to highlight another program. I did want to share with you, Autism Awareness Month just passed last April, and this past month, and I wanted to share with you a very quick video that was put together by some of the students who attend Wilson Commencement, a short TikTok on autism awareness. Oh, and we don't have sound, I don't believe. So there's musical along with it, but all of the messages are there for you, so you can.
Oh, sorry. It keeps stopping. My apologies.
That's okay. All right, and that is it for our ASD programs. I know that Michelle Osgood is going to share with you about our Project Search program.
So good evening. We also wanted to highlight for you Project Search, which to me is a very bright gem that we have, and many people don't know that we have it. So we wanted to make sure that you were aware of Project Search as well. Project Search was actually developed in Cincinnati at the Children's Hospital in 1996 by Aaron Reel. It started out as just one single site, and it has grown into an international network of sites. Their primary objective is to secure competitive employment for students with significant intellectual and developmental disabilities. The students are typically in their last year of high school eligibility. They have an active IEP and a desire to be competitively employed. Next slide. We currently have one Project Search site location in our district. It is located at 57 St. Paul Street, which is taught by our special education teacher, Colleen Brindamore, who has been the teacher of Project Search for the last 11 years. The class is a 12-1-1 special class with a combined focus of soft skills and supported internship experiences. The goal for all the students is competitive employment. Currently, the employment rate for people with disabilities in the city of Rochester is 25%. The employment rate 6 months after graduation from Project Search is 50%. Next slide. Project Search also partners with the U of R Strong Center for Developmental Disabilities. They are actually the statewide coordinator for Project Search. The Office for People with Developmental Disabilities and Access VR provide funding for employment specialists through Job Path. And then of course we have the ARC, the Job Path, which provides the employment specialist for Project Search and provides supported employment services to our graduates. The City of Rochester provides a classroom and some of our internship sites. Next slide. This is a list of just some of the places that our students have graduated Project Search and had gainful employment after graduation. Also some of the places that they did their internships with. And this is just a short video. I don't know if we have sound.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's a technical difficulty with my computer. If I stop the screen, I know the slide is important, so I'm going to stop the share for a moment and bring it back up so you can hear it. Okay, let's try this again.
My name is Emma Rossiter.
Can you all hear it now?
I am a student of Project Search, and I'm working an internship at City Hall. At my internship, I scan files.
Hold on.
And important documents. We learn about, well, right now we're learning about budgeting, money, banks, all kinds of stuff, how the bank works, like the deposits, withdrawals, and we also talk about job skills. And every Monday we have job club by another student that used to work here but graduated, and now he actually works for the city. Hi, my name is Emma Rossiter.
So that is two of the programs that we wanted to highlight for you tonight, and weren't sure if you had any additional questions for us.
Thank you. As I mentioned to Desiree and her team when we were in the preview meeting, I don't know if any other commissioners, President White or Commissioner Powell, I don't know, I had never heard of Project Search. And I think that that's a real gem in our community, something that we need to be highlighted. I do envision over the next few years, that there's gonna be a greater spotlight on the disabled community in terms of their contributions to our world. I just see that happening over the next few years. And so I was very impressed with that program, and thank you so very much for sharing that, all of that work, because it gives me a better understanding of what the work that's being done in our special needs, special education department. But I have a couple of questions, and I think I knew this before, but I don't know it now. What's the percentage of our students who are students of special needs, and specifically the percentage of students who are autistic?
I have to look that back up, but I know we have that, and I know I presented that in our presentation in February, so I can,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Are there any other questions from President White? You're muted.
Yes, Vice President Elliott, I just wanted to piggyback on what you said. It's important that we get out the good news of the good things that are happening. You guys provide a data-rich assessment of the program or programs, and we should hold that up. And I know that Marisol and her boss, the superintendent, are trying to think of creative ways through social media to show the good work that is happening in the district. I know a lot of the programs for our students with disabilities or special needs, they can't get that kind of programming out in the suburbs. You guys are really equipped to do things that nobody else can do. And as Vice President Elliott said, you've got some really good results. And I don't know how exactly we need to get the word out, but instead of everybody focusing about how poor we are as a district and all the problems we have, there's some really good stuff happening in the district, and you guys are a part of that. So I hope the superintendent and her staff can figure out a way, as they currently are trying to do, to get that good word out. So thank you for that good work.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any other questions? Thank you, Desiree, your team. Great presentation. Thank you for sharing those programs with us, and just take care of our children, take care of our babies. Thank you. Dr. Morris, you're up with regard to zone reconfiguration.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So much. And I do have a number of task force co-members here. So I at least want to let you all know that that's who else is in the room with us. I'm going to be presenting along with my colleagues, Dr. Peluso and Dr. Green, some of the work that we have done in the Zone Reconfiguration Task Force, and bringing 3 recommendations that the task force has for your consideration today, for your discussion and your input. We just want to bring you up to speed with where we are and where we're going, and definitely hear from you in terms of how we should proceed. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share the PowerPoint. All right, sorry. All right, so once again, good evening, everyone. I am joined by my colleagues, Dr. Green and Dr. Peluso, but also we have several other members present who are part of the Rochester Zone Configuration Task Force. So what we would like to do tonight is bring everybody up to speed on the work that we have done thus far and the work that still lies ahead. We still have a lot of significant work ahead of us in regards to this important initiative. All of the work that we have done has been centered around, in part, the strategic plan that the superintendent has outlined for us to consider anytime we're making decisions in relation to the district and its future. So all of the decisions and the recommendations that we have brought today, we have tried to carefully consider the information that we have thus far that relates to its linkage to the strategic plan. And the work that we are doing, we really are examining at this stage the 3 zones that are currently relating to how the district is outlined right now. So right now we have 3 main zones which have been defined through board policy. And what we have done is, based on a charge that was given to the district by the independent monitor in the November document, we were asked by December to create a task force that would examine the feasibility of the current zone structure. And then there are several additional tasks that this task force has been charged with examining and bringing forth recommendations to the Board of Education for your consideration and input. So this is just one of the tasks that we have been brought to you tonight to consider. So we are looking at tonight the layout of the zone as it is currently delineated in the district. So, as I mentioned, in December, the independent monitor charged the district to form a zone reconfiguration task force. We had to, as a task force, look at the current layout of the district, and not just in the zoning. We have several other areas that we must examine, but we are looking at what needs to be examined in terms of the layout of the district to make it most efficient, make it most supportive of our students and school needs, making sure that it is in alignment with the desire of the board, the parents, the community, and the staff. And we have done several ways of trying to get input from the community and from the staff, including, but not limited to, we had forums in April. We have met with several stakeholder groups. We have collaborated in part with many different groups, such as students, parents, staff, community partners, to ensure that as we proceed, we are getting feedback from multiple stakeholders in order to bring that information to the board for your consideration. So the policy that we've been charged to look at further is really relating to the parent preference managed choice policy 5153. And that policy is pretty broad, but there are several aspects to it that the task force has really looked in depth to try and come up with some ideas and recommendations to put forward in front of the board for discussion and for input, so that we know once we leave here as a task force, what is the charge for us to continue to look at further? Do you want us to look at which one of the recommendations, or is there a recommendation that may have formed that we didn't come up with that you would like us to take a look at? So the policy itself reviews enrollment of students, student improvement, student mobility, home schools, and transportation. And we have looked at all of the bullets that are listed to your right on this slide to try and examine things that we could determine would be areas that you might want to consider as a board as you ask us to move forward with this. So our timeline is we first were given that charge in December. Then we took the information that we had gathered, and it was time for us to start to try and contact community members to try and ask for their feedback. And now we are bringing these recommendations to the board for your input and your discussion to help us as we move forward with your guidance about the direction to proceed. Some of the ways that we have engaged the community included a public meeting that was done in April. And additionally, we have met with several stakeholder groups, including tonight, we joked that we're having a dueling piano presentation tonight, because we have a presentation that's going on both here. And also we have members of the task force that are presenting at the BEC as well. So simultaneously, we have presentations going on in two different groups, but we have spoken to students, we have spoken to parents, we've spoken to the BEC, both the executive committee and the full group. We've sent information out via the Friday letter. We've sent information out via our internal communications as well. And we've also formed something called a community advisory team, where we've asked for members of the community to join another team that we have formed that will allow us to have task force-like discussions and discuss things such as subgroups and the information that we have relating to zone reconfiguration and managed choice as we proceed.
Dr. Morris, would you just say what BEC stands for our audience?
The Bilingual Education Committee. So
Okay,
that is where, as I said, we have a few of our task force members who are meeting with that team tonight too. So just before I hand over the floor to our subcommittee chairs, I just want to at least emphasize to the board that we have two subcommittees. The work that is handled by each subcommittee is in two broad umbrellas. One is in zone reconfiguration, which is what we're talking about today. So remember that map that I have referred to earlier where it has 3 cuts right now. We are going to put in front of the board for your discussion and your input the 3 recommendations that we came up with for zone reconfiguration. However, we also have a subcommittee that is looking into the policies that are relating to managed choice. And we have got a lot of feedback from the community, a lot of feedback from parents. I was meeting with parents as recently as yesterday, talking about and receiving their feedback about managed choice and things they would like to see different, no matter what zone reconfiguration recommendation the board recommends for us to explore further. So we have several things that are in the each umbrella for zone reconfiguration and for managed choice. And we are on a timeline that ultimately ends in January 2022. Based on the timeline that is in the independent monitor's plan. And that will be when we will bring a full plan that will include zone reconfiguration recommendations and the recommendations for changes in policy for managed choice. And at that point, the changes that the board wants us to incorporate will be incorporated at that time. So at this point, we are sharing the work that the subcommittee for zone reconfiguration has completed. And I will now turn the table to Dr. Peluso and Dr. Green.
Good evening. Good evening, President White, Vice President Elliott, Board Commissioners. I had the privilege of co-chairing the Zone Reconfiguration Subcommittee with Dr. Green, and we're going to take you through some of the work we've done and the process that we've gone through, and then share our recommendations. So we first started with taking a look at some historical documents and some current data, and we looked at the proposed elementary school parent preference managed choice plan from 2001. We reviewed the RCSD school choice assignment policy from 2014. And then we looked at our student count by zone as of March 2021 when we began our work. Where did students live by school? K-8 in 2019. And then we re-looked at that data again for where they live by school in 2021. And then we also kind of broke that down and also looked at where did students live by grade level. And on this slide, you'll see a sample of one of the, I know it's tight, it's hard to see, but that would be a grade level where our students live across the city. If we could go to the next slide. You know, through all of our conversations and everything that we talked about, we had to be cognizant that we had to ensure that we were providing successful programming citywide, right? That there's, no matter what zone or whatever happens, that we have access to successful programming and our students have access to student programming. That we maintain equitable access to service and programs. That we ground our decisions in data. That we try to have the least disruption to the families as possible. And that we're aware of any unintended consequences such as school demographics and transportation costs. So the zone reconfiguration team really came up with three recommendations. One of them being no change and keeping them as is in a northeast, northwest, south quadrant triangle model that we have now, to split it into 2 zones along the Genesee River with the east side and a west, and then also the potential of having a no zone neighborhood school model. And with each of those, we've done, and on the bottom of the slide here, you see a strength, weakness, opportunities, threats. We did a SWOT analysis with the teams to kind of look at what is each of those recommendations give us. And at this point, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Green, who's going to share the results of that exercise.
Good evening to President White, Vice President Elliott, and commissioners. And so as Dr. Peluso said, we looked at 3 recommendations. And so I'm going to talk about the work that we captured from all of the input from the teams that Dr. Morris mentioned earlier. with our community advisory task force, our parent group, our student groups. And so if we can go to the next slide, the first recommendation was the 2 zones. And that's where we looked at splitting our zones by the river and having a west side and an east side. And some of the outcomes of that recommendation would be that we could create feeder patterns between our elementary and middle schools. Currently, our zone configuration does not allow for us to have feeder patterns. And so if we had 2 zones, we can have enough elementary schools and middle schools on one side of the river so that students will stay in that group of schools to move through from elementary to specific middle, junior high schools. We also talked about this would zone offices would better support the schools. So if we had 2 zones, we can put our resources into those 2 zones to support our students, both academically, social, emotionally, and support our families by having zones within those areas. It would also create more choice for families. Right now with 3 zones, we have a smaller selection of schools within those 3 zones. If we had 2 zones, families have more choice on the east side or the west side of the river. The managed choice policy would have to be adjusted because currently it does not have a piece in there for 7th and 8th grade. Our current managed choice policy focuses on kindergarten through 6th grade. If we had 2 zones and built the model so that we have middle schools on each side of the river, we would have to readjust the managed choice policy. And certainly there would be an impact to transportation. So within those 2 zones, if a family chooses a school that's farther from their home, they may need the transportation. So there could be an impact to transportation with the 2 zone recommendation. Next slide, please. Then we talked about if we remain with our current 3 zone model. The recommendations that the feedback that we received from our community was this would limit any transitions for students and families. The current structure will allow our families to stay where they are. There's no movement that would happen. However, it would be difficult to create this feeder pattern for our students. Currently within our 3 zones, we do not have that feeder pattern for elementary school students to go right to a middle school. The current support structure will just remain the same as it is a northwest, northeast, and a south zone. We will have less choice for our families as we are within the 3 zones. There's only so many schools that you can pick from within your zone. And then it will continue to have this difficult family and school connection within those 3 zones, that we can't build that neighborhood model, the community model that we've been talking about if we remain within those 3 zones. Next slide. And then the third recommendation was to have no zones and look at neighborhood schools so that students will attend a school within a small cluster within their neighborhood. So the students and families can select from that small cluster, which would be close to their residency. So we would have a selection of schools near their home that they can select from. We will have an opportunity to build for community neighborhood schools. The managed choice policy would need to be revised because of the neighborhood. It will limit the options for families to choose from. And this could be a potential transportation cost savings because if families remain in their neighborhood, schools near their home, they may not need transportation for neighborhood schools. So those are our 3 recommendations. However, we wanted to look at the next slide, please. What are some other considerations that we have to take into account as we consider those 3 recommendations? We certainly have to consider transportation. How would that impact transportation? Would families have opportunities to have more transportation access or less transportation access? Another consideration is transition of our current student population. If we were to change the model, how many of our families would be impacted and how many students we would have to transition from current schools to a school within the new zone model or the neighborhood school. Certainly, we would have to look at the managed choice policy. How would that align to the selected recommendation? So whichever recommendation we select, certainly we have to go back to the managed choice policy and make the adjustments to the policy to fit the selection of the model that we would use. We would also have to consider the alignment of the number of schools to student enrollment. So we would have, if we look at the two sides of the river, how many schools will we have on each side of the river, and how many students will be enrolled in each of those schools within those two zones, as well as if we consider no zones, how many schools will be in that cluster, and what will the enrollment be within that cluster. Another consideration is no matter which recommendation we select, we want to ensure equity and access to all of our programs within whatever zone model we select. We want to ensure that families have equal access to high quality instructional programs, our bilingual programs, our ENL student population, as well as our enrichment opportunities. So certainly whatever model, we want to make sure there's an equal access for all programs and ensuring a high quality education at all of our schools. And then the last consideration we put on here is currently we have several schools that are citywide schools, and how would that work within the model that we selected? How can we maintain the citywide programs that have unique opportunities for our students and families, and will we have those opportunities within all of the zones, no matter which zone model we select? Next slide, please. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Morris with next steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Peluso and Dr. Green. So our next steps are we would like board input and direction based on the recommendations to help the task force as we explore further. The reason for our positioning at this point is the zoning recommendations are part of this larger work that we've been charged to explore. This is relating to both zone reconfiguration and managed choice. And this work is due to be concluded by January 2022 for action that would begin no earlier than 22-23 school year. Additionally, we need a lot more data than we have right now to provide a cogent, solid recommendation for moving forward. And so we also are having a feasibility study that is being conducted. That work will be conducted and complement the companion document that we provided to the board today. The companion document that we sent gives you an outline of some of the background history that we considered, some research that's been done by the district. It also considers some of the survey information that we received. We received almost 1,500 responses for our survey. And we have a lot of additional feedback that we've received as well. But the feasibility study is important because that independent vendor will come in and they will be able to do more in-depth research, and they will help formulate recommendations based on the feasibility of the recommendations and the charges that were given today. And they can collect additional feedback. They will have a larger scope to do so. And they will be able to do research such as looking at live birth trend data. They'll be able to look at zoning and distribution of neighborhood patterns, et cetera. And so lastly, the task force will continue to convene additional community discussions. As I mentioned, we've also convened an advisory team, and that advisory team is just one of the many ways that we want to continue moving forward, engaging the community in this important work. And so we want to look at having additional public meetings, having additional focus groups, having public hearings, and having continued meetings with our community stakeholders. So thank you very much for hearing our recommendations this evening, and we'll turn it over for questions. I just need to take.
Yeah. Thank you, Thank you, Dr. Morris. I see that Commissioner Malloy has her hand raised, and I see Commissioner Clark, and I'm not seeing the full screen, so those two can go. Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vice President Elliott. First and foremost, thank you so much for the presentation. You know, as many people know, I'm a huge supporter of neighborhood schooling efforts, as well as community schooling efforts. I think that our current model is not sustainable, so I'm very pleased to see that this is something that we're endeavoring to spearhead. Seriously, busing children all over Rochester is not only it's a huge expense. It's not only something that we can't sustain, but it leaves a huge carbon footprint, and it really is breaking down community ties for so many of our students. So I am pleased to see that we're trying to create an infrastructure that builds on community or looks at community building, and then also something that's going to eventually target student enrollment or student enrollment growth. Our declining enrollment, as you know, is one of our most pressing issues. And if it continues at the current rate, we're not going to have a district left for very long. So I think that, you know, looking at this through a common sense approach is going to not only help save us money in the long run, it's going to help to encourage increased district investment in neighborhoods that need it most. And we're going to have to look at this maybe from a phased approach. I think this isn't going to be something that we can do overnight. Whatever decision we come to as a board, we're going to have to phase this in over the next few years. You know, looking at targeting newer families. Are we building an infrastructure that attracts families to our district so that we're not losing them to suburban communities? So there's just so much going on here. I know this is a monumental or behemoth task, but looking forward to seeing where this goes. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Commissioner Clark?
Yes, in reviewing the three models, I agree that we cannot continue with the three-zone model because it kind of keeps us in the status quo of doing what we've always done. But I'm also a big proponent of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And my biggest fear with going to community schools is that in Rochester, we have some of the most segregated sections of any city. And if we move too quickly to community schools, we're going to have community schools in communities that have no other resources other than the school. And I think it would put those students at a major, who are already at a disadvantage, at a major disadvantage if we move too quickly. So, you know, given the fact that we don't have equity in the system yet, and given the fact that we do want to keep as much diversity in our buildings as possible, I feel that the two-zone system is the best way to go, because you're building the feeder systems and you're giving all of our children an opportunity to learn. Because, I mean, as I used to say in the Common Core argument, your zip code should not determine your outcome in life. And my biggest fear is, given the racial makeup of neighborhoods, if we go to community schools, that's exactly what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Commissioner Adams? Commissioner Adams?
As a parent in this, can you hear me?
Yes.
You can't hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. As a parent in this district, I live like two football fields away from a school, and I refused to send my kids to that school because there was no equity, because they had a 0.5 librarian, 0.2 art teacher, and I refused to send my daughters to that school. They ended up going to a different school, a citywide school. But had I had not been given an option, I'd have went to private school. I wouldn't have went to charter school, but I'd have took my kids to private school. I would have had to. You would have forced me. We cannot be trapping people and making more people leave this district. What we need to do is on here where it says scope and purpose, school improvement, that's what we need. We need to not put the carriage before the horse. We need to work on these schools, make them equitable, and people will accept what I would have accepted 16. Being able to walk my kids to school every day, saving all that gas. I would have accepted that. But we haven't, we have to, and we need to do that anyway. It's just the right thing to do, to make our school, all of them be the same. All of them have a librarian. Yeah, you're gonna have special schools that would that have maybe music, certain like Soda might have dance and art and all that. You may have those type of special schools, but other than that, in general, man, all the schools got to have art teachers and all of that. And so I'm really concerned about us jumping the gun, talking about doing this and doing that. Rezoning, and just making, then we try to fit the schools and the families into that, what we figured out. No, I think we should get these schools to make our schools better. Our results in these schools is terrible, terrible. We're not getting no good results. And so I think we need to just upgrade our schools. That's my biggest concern. And so there's some things on here that says like create more choice for families. If the school is as good as the school across town, nobody needs a choice. We're gonna go wherever you put us. When I was coming up and going to school, I wasn't allowed to come over here to the west side of school. I had about 3 schools I could go to, and we just went there. So I just need to say that I do have concerns, and I don't have the answers. But I know I just would support upgrading our schools first before we do all this stuff. We're looking at as far as I'm concerned, the carriage before the horse. With that, I'm done.
Thank you, President White.
Yes, thank you, Vice President Elliott. Question for the question log, or if you can be answered tonight right away and briefly, that's fine. To what extent were these recommendations informed by the special, I think it was called Special Advisory Committee that was created by the board and was chaired by Commissioner Hallmark? She met with residents of the community. The process lasted for at least 5 to 6 months. And I believe they issued some recommendations and certainly gave it they memorialized their findings in writing. So I'd like to know to what extent were these 3 recommendations informed by that? Secondly, Barbara Dean Williams issued a report called the Path Forward Report. It too went into great detail about this issue regarding school choice. I'm wondering to what extent your work, and it doesn't mean you can't get at that stuff now, and because you indicated, Dr. Morris, that your work was continuing, but it is important, and I made this point earlier on. Can't always just be reinventing the wheel. We have to rely on the work that was done previously, even if we decide it wasn't valuable. But I got to hear that we looked at it and we thought it was helpful, or we thought it was not helpful. So at some point, if you could, and you can, Rahima, you can put this in the question log if you like, but I'd like to know to what extent we relied on that good work. She put Dr. Hallmark put a lot of work into that, and I know she had a lot of people participating. I went to some of those meetings. So it'd be good to know that there was some reference to that work along with Barbara Dean Williams' Path Forward. The thing about the Path Forward, you all recall, she didn't make any decisions because she couldn't get board consensus behind her work. And so that recommendations that related to that, it just sort of came to a halt. And I'm not saying it should or it shouldn't have, but a lot of work was put into it. And I just want to make sure that we are not reinventing the wheel. To Commissioner Clark and also to Commissioner Adams' point, I think they essentially are making the same point about there's not equity in our neighborhoods. And Commissioner Adams says putting the cart before the horse or vice versa. That's true. That's always been my objection when Commissioner Hallmark was talking about this. I said, you know, you can come up with neighborhood schools, but it's not fair to relegate people in certain zip codes to schools that we know aren't up to speed. That's why parents are choosing with their feet. That's why parents are choosing schools 1.5 miles away. They're doing it intentionally. These parents are smart. They're strategic. And they're picking schools that in the lottery or for their choice that are outside their 1.5 miles because they don't, this is not my assessment, but this is theirs. They don't believe that the schools have what they need. And Mr. Adams indicated that the school wasn't sufficient. I got to tell you, my kids who went to school K through 12, I was okay with the neighborhood school, but if I wasn't, and as a matter of fact, at one point, I remember thinking, this is long before I was on the board, East High School was, it was long after, I forgot the principal's name, I think it was Pedzik, who was over East. Long after he left East, East was not the school that it used to be. And I was like, I was not gonna have my kids go to East. And that was supposed to be the neighborhood school. I just wasn't, Monroe was a middle school. I would just, so people, vote with their, and I always did that as a parent, K through 12 with my first two kids. I made decisions based on what I thought was equitable. Sometimes in my neighborhood, number 12 school was a good school. It had OLA, it had MAP. So yeah, I could, but I wasn't gonna send my kids to a school that was in my zone that I did not think was up to speed. So to the question of what do we do, or as Dr. King said, where do we go from here? I think the first thing you have to do, and this is what Commissioner Adams, I think, is saying, you got to make sure our schools are together. And that is going to take time. So the question becomes, what do we do in the meantime? And to the extent it makes some sense, Mr. Adams, Commissioner Adams, and to those listening, maybe, and you guys haven't finished having this conversation, maybe the 2-zone is the way you sort of work the in-between solution. Because I agree with Commissioner Adams that it's not, it wouldn't be right in some of our neighborhoods to say, you got to go to school in your neighborhood. And let's not forget, you can get the schools together, but those neighborhoods that those kids have to walk through ain't right. So Dr. Morris, Dr. Myers, y'all working real hard, but if our neighborhoods are neighborhoods where people are getting shot and prostitutes all up in the streets, these are the neighborhoods, because we have this 1.5 miles, children have to walk through. So we have to not only think in terms of what the equities are in terms of books and academics and teachers and libraries and music, but we have to think about the neighborhoods. And that means that the state legislature has to maybe get rid of that 1.5 mile rule, because you know you could have a lot of good things going on, Dr. Morris, and parents, because these are their babies, and rightly so, they're not gonna send the kids to schools if they know they gotta walk through a neighborhood where car was parked and somebody was just driving drunk and just ran over somebody and killed somebody. I talked to the son of that man today. It just, you know, so we have to look comprehensively, and Dr. Myers, we have to, of course, look to the city as a partner to answer some of these questions. So I agree with Commissioner Adams, but I also think that if we're hell bent on doing something sooner than later, because somehow we can't wait until the equity gets there, because this may take some years. Maybe the 2-zone is the approach. And then the last question I had, Vice President Elliott, is it wasn't clear to me, and I apologize. Maybe I'm just not on it today. But were you all recommending the 2-zone, or were you just still going? It sounded to me like the 2-zone was you guys were kind of liking the 2-zone, but maybe I misheard that. Do you have a recommendation yet?
We are agnostic in terms of the recommendations. So we tried to present the pros and the cons using that SWOT analysis that Dr. Peluso described, relating to the strengths and the weaknesses of each proposal. So Dr. Green very thoroughly presented, and also the accompanying document that we sent a little bit earlier has some further detail for you. But just to let you know that we did not want to present the recommendations with any particular lean towards any. We wanted to really get your input and your response to this. Also, I wanted to let you know we have considered the prior work that was done in this area. What I feel that the feasibility study work will do is allow us a more in-depth application of that prior work to the work that we're doing now. So by bringing in an outside vendor with that psychometric tools and the analysis capacity that they have, they can take that work that was done before alongside the other work that Dr. Peluso described at the beginning and help us have a better strategized picture of recommendations. And then we might be able to prioritize one recommendation over another. But right now, we're just giving you the 3 that we've come up with, agnostic, and putting that in front of the board. And then lastly, to address the concern that was raised by you, Commissioner Clark, and Commissioner Adams, as Dr. Green and Dr. Peluso and I can attest, we've received a lot of feedback from the community thus far. And what you've just described, it has been resounding in a lot of the feedback that we have received. So we have heard that clearly. And as we're going forward, we are making sure that our strategic plan is working to address the academic equity that is necessary to make sure that our schools, no matter where you live and where you are equitably resourced and are of high excellence for all of our students, no matter your zip code. So I just want to at least say for those 3 things, we have looked into that, and I at least wanted to assure you for that, but we can give you further information if you would like it.
Commissioner LeBron?
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. So I have a couple of things. One, I don't feel that what was presented tonight to the board is detailed enough. Dr. Green asked some questions that I would have loved presented answers to tonight. I don't personally need the questions. I need those answers to those questions in order for me to make an informed decision on this. However, I do want to set the record straight that the board did vote to continue with the same model with fidelity. That is on record. There is a resolution and a vote for that. That was probably, I would have repeated this multiple times, but probably one of the first times I really flipped out because we were coming in on Saturdays. This district has already hired consultants to have these SWOT analysis and deep, and this is nothing against you all, because you are all now coming in to some of you are coming in new and trying to figure this out. But President White is right in the regard that there is extensive work that was already done. There was a commissioner who had a committee. He's right. They met for 6 months. Barbara did the path forward. She went into different neighborhoods. She had all of these meetings, her first 100 days. She gathered all of this, lots of feedback. This community, it should be like burnt out from giving this district feedback on what they want to see and how we move forward. And then having it almost feels like the audacity for us to talk about funding schools equitably when we have the authority to do so and have not done so. I don't even want to be upset about this, but it is upsetting that it's been a repetitive conversation in my 3 years on this school board. I legitimately have only been here 3 years. I'm still ending my first term for a 4-year term. So it's the same repetitive conversation. We've had the authority, we have the power to fund our schools equitably. When we have the conversation that we can't rezone or figure this out because our schools are not funded equitably, and we approve a budget and we don't make the force on the superintendent to fund our schools equitably across, that is the definition of insanity. And I said the exact same thing in that rezoning meeting with the consultant that came, who presented this board over a series of Saturdays, a comprehensive 3 different options. I will give this consultant that was here that kudos. It was comprehensive in terms of here are the 3 different options. One actually addressed and discussed equity specifically. To address the 1.5 mile, because I was a parent in this district. I literally just started driving 10 years ago. So, I've been a parent in this district for 18 plus years. And the majority of those years I was on RTS with my kids and walking them to school. And I was a parent that fell in that 1.3 miles. And it will impact attendance because I had a child who's chronically asthmatic and we have heavy winters in Rochester. That does not mean that we can't figure out a way to create community stops where we're driving our kids or busing them in a community stop to their schools in a certain area that we're not going all the way zip zoning all across the entire city of Rochester. And lastly, and I will end with this because this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I feel like we have had ample consultants to figure this out, is the fact that we are a 4-zone city. So while we talk about 3 zones, 2 zones, our parents who have to take RTS still have to navigate that system in a 4-zone with transportation. And we are not great with transportation in Rochester. RTS does the best that they can. We have a transit center now. We didn't have a transit center when I was on the bus, so that's a blessing. But if we're talking about how transportation overall in this community is factored in RTS in terms of routes, they're not in this 2-zone. We're gonna end up putting families in a position where either a 2-zone or staying in the 3-zone where we're there at now, where you have to catch multiple buses to get to your child's school. Now think about this when we're having parent engagement or parent teacher night, and I have to catch 2 or 3 buses to get to my child's school to have a meeting with a teacher for 30 minutes. I'm not gonna do it, but then you're gonna accuse me as a parent of not being engaged. I can't do it. I have multiple kids at home. Like, these are my lived experiences. So yes, I know this frustration. It has been ongoing. We can create equity right now. We can create it right now, July 1st, with these federal dollars coming in. Make that a priority. Fund our schools equitably and then figure out this rezoning thing and changing our school choice policy with the data like President White presented. And I'm glad he put it on the board question log, because if you're using it, I want you to show us the documents you're using so we can say, yes, that was exactly what Dr. Hallmark and her team put together and presented to this board. Yes, that was what the consultants that were here before presented to this board. I want to see that evidence that you're using that. I don't see it in that 30-page document that you sent us earlier, and I didn't see it in the presentation. And with that, I'm done. Thank you, Vice President Elliott.
Thank you for that passionate conversation. Commissioner Powell?
I want to applaud every board member who spoke before me for bringing such really fruitful information or, perspectives to the table. And I share, quite frankly, I share the same frustrations that Commissioner LeBron shared. Even the proposal to implement with fidelity went absolutely nowhere, because implementing with fidelity would have meant addressing the cross-zone busing problem, and that didn't happen. So we didn't even do the bare minimum of implementing with fidelity. To Commissioner Clark's point about the potential for not having equity from a socioeconomic standpoint, I don't think that going to 2-zone is fundamentally different from going to a no zone or a zoneless choice system, and I'll tell you why. When we first implemented this choice system, we did an evaluation after 1 year of the kindergarten entry point, and we found that before choice, we had a handful of schools that had 1% or less of students of European descent at the kindergarten level only. And then we had, and some schools that had no children of European descent. In other words, 100% of the enrollment at kindergarten level was persons of color. And 1 year later, the numbers were exactly the same. The difference was that some schools that had 1% students of European descent had changed to 0, and some that were 0 changed to 1%. The fact is that our city, from a racial perspective, has lost so much diversity. It is a minority district that we're not going to achieve racial balancing by manipulating zones anymore. There's just not enough students to go around to produce real balance. I don't know if that makes any sense. On the other hand, to Van's point about maybe the 2 zones is the way to go in order to provide equity, or I forgot what your point was now, Van, but the thing is, with the 3-zone system, our parents already have more choices than they can appropriately evaluate. And they're not being given really the best guidance. They're not being necessarily told which schools have high academic performance, which schools have the best programs, what have you. So, so long as families have more than one school within a walking distance to choose from, this zoneless choice is a very sensible option. My only worry is that if the schools if the schools that are being offered to a family are all less than stellar, we're going to have more families choosing charter schools instead of less. That's my worry. And I think the only way we find out is to start the feasibility study. Get somebody in here who can really dig into the data and tell us whether every household would have at least one good school by state standards within their choices. Truth is, as you said, Van, sometimes the choice isn't about the academics. Sometimes it's about, I don't want my child walking through this neighborhood we live in because it's not safe. And I agree with you. We have to put pedal to the metal and get them start talking about funding a neighborhood school bus routes. Because the alternative is families will go to charter schools and the state will be paying for very long bus routes to the charter schools. So I think what I'm hearing from my colleagues is, so far, because Vice President Elliott hasn't really weighed in yet, is that the current state of 3 zones has exhausted itself. It is not really an option anymore. I don't think anybody believes it can be an option anymore. But I don't know that I would be leaning towards a 2-zone system or a 4-zone system for that matter to address Commissioner LeBron's point without more analysis. So I think we got to get feasibility study in here to determine whether any of these options, continues to be viable, given the current state of the demographics.
Vice President Elliott, you're muted.
She might have an internet issue.
It looks like it.
Well, I don't know, Cynthia, if you're having an issue, but I see that our parent rep, Ms. Clinkscale, was trying to say something. Are you there, Yvonne?
Yes, I'm here, honey.
Why don't you go ahead? Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so I'm listening about what we're talking about with rezoning. As a parent, and because we have such a young parent population, I think one of the issues
Raheem, I am
are
having computer issues. I don't seem to be able to use my.
Go ahead, Ms. Klingskill. I think she was.
so as a younger population, I think that's one of the issues when we talk about attendance. Me being in the community, I work with parents and kids all the time. Most of our parents, believe it or not, are probably 16 years younger than their kids, especially when you talk about high school. And think about your student population. Our kids have become very, very, and I'm gonna keep it real, lazy. So I think for a zone where kids are actually able to walk to school would be a whole lot holistic for our students. If I live down here on Norton and all I got to do is walk down the street to Franklin, I'm more apt as a student probably to go to school. One of the things that happens is that we're busing kids in all different directions. And because of Rochester and its demographics, you have kids who have issues with kids from one side of town to the another. So I think keeping kids within their neighborhood, now you have kids who are already intact with each other. Now you have a population where kids can actually walk to school. Parents can walk their kids to school. To me, that is going to increase your attendance. One of the things is that most parents, believe it or not, go to work before their kids have to go to school. So if they're not home to supervise that, or the kids got to be responsible sometimes for getting to school, that becomes an obstacle for kids to go to school. If they have the ability to get up, walk to school, that gives them a better option of getting to school every day. I think we at this, I mean, I've been sitting on this board for a long time in different capacities. Van, you know that. So I think one of the things is that we got to put our kids first. We don't do that. And I've been sitting in these meetings for a while, and all I hear you guys talking about is how we can sit on this board and have this other committee come in. You don't need that, as Van stated. You got all the data that y'all need to understand that we are a failing district. And until we get enough guts to actually make some actions, we're going to keep getting the same results. I've been sitting with y'all for about 7 years. And this is the same conversation we had when y'all was restructuring the schools with East getting all the money and certain schools being left out. Then I see you smiling because you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so when are we going to change? When are we going to actually put some actions in place? Stop having 1,000 committees researching the same information over and over again. So that's what frustrates me as a parent and as a person. I'm also a community agency. I work in a program called In Control. We teach sexual health within your district. So it's not like I'm not informed on what I see. Your special education program is crap. I'm still seeing students not get adequate education to actually make them productive students. You got kids who are getting 1 pages of education, and that doesn't make sense. We're not preparing our students really to become productive citizens. And that's the whole district. So until we get bold enough to say, listen, our kids are important.
I don't know if
Our kids is just as important as Webster. So we got to make some serious changes and make it easier for parents to get their kids educated. And if that means that we're going to rezone it where parents can walk their kids to school. I live over here in the Northeast District, over here by 39 School. And I'm surrounded by a whole lot of households that kids are actually getting on a bus to go somewhere when 39 School is right across the street from them. That doesn't make sense. That is not being fiscally responsible. So now what you're doing is you're taking a kid that's right across the school from the school and you're sending them way over on Dewey Avenue, number 7 school. That doesn't make fiscal sense to me. First of all, that cuts down on your transportation. So now with that transportation money that you're spending all this money with RTS, I think we get them what, 30, 40, I don't know how much y'all pay them. But my thing is that those are funds that can be reiterated into quality programming within our schools, because we don't get quality programming. I'm telling y'all that for real, because I'm there. You don't get that. So you're paying a lot of money for services that are not even being dispensed. So why not make it easier for parents to get their kids to school by zoning them in their own neighborhood where they can actually walk to school? But that's just me as an outsider, because I am certainly an outsider. I'm not an insider. I'm an outsider looking in. So my thing is, Rochester City School District, until you guys decide that y'all not afraid to take a chance on making changes within our district, then we're going to keep getting what we get. Because without change,
thank you, ma'am,
there would be no change.
Thank you, Yvonne. I always appreciate your input. And Commissioner Powell had mentioned that I had not spoken. From my inception on the board, I've always been a proponent of neighborhood schools. And because of the reasons that have been iterated this evening, it's just, parents have easier access. Our students can walk to school, although in some of the neighborhoods, we can provide transportation because of, I believe, the crime and having to go through, sections where there's drugs being sold and that kind of thing. So I would support transportation for those. I just think there are just so many benefits to having neighborhood schools. If they are equitable, if they have, to Commissioner Adams' point, equitable academic support, in terms of, just all the things that our students need, art, music, library access, and just a whole host of things. In fact, those schools that are the most neediest, in my view, need the most services. And so, so if we can, I'm not exactly sure what zone, but what I do want is there to be the neighborhood schools, so that our parents can have the access, our kids can have the access, and the community is able to connect with those students and families that attend those schools. That's just so important. When I was at Baden Street, one of the issues that we had with number 9 school, with our after school programs, is many of those students were bused and couldn't receive the services. And so, in terms of just after school programming, neighborhood schools, in my view, is far more beneficial. So I would just leave it at that, because it looks like, we're over time. So any other questions or comments before we close this presentation? Well, Dr. Morris.
I'm sorry, Vice President Elliott. I
Yes.
was trying to raise my hand, but I just physically raised it. But I think our parent rep also had one last thing she wanted to say too.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just know that I'm having Zoom issues.
We know.
Okay.
And my last thing that I just wanted to say is that definitely neighborhood schools would be more beneficial. And like you said, for me, all of our schools should be equitable. That shouldn't be a question as to whether the school in the neighborhood is equitable. That's that we vote you in as a board to assure that that's happening. And if you're saving money on transportation, then that money needs to be allocated to me to making sure that whatever school is in that neighborhood is equitable. And that every school in our district has the same resources throughout the district. That needs to be across the board. That shouldn't be in selected schools. And I find that sometime within our district, that's what we do. If we got a school that's looking like, okay, they're really great, so let's give them more resources. No. If that school is great, then those resources need to be disseminated throughout the district. And that's how we got to think. We got to think if we got one great, then we need to make 20 great. If we got one model that's working, then that needs to be replicated without our district, regardless of where those students are. And that's how we got to start thinking. That's how the suburban schools think. Why aren't we thinking like that? If you go out to Webster, there's equity be across elementary, primary, and high school. With us, we have a lot of elementary schools that might be great. You got a whole lot that are not. So I'm just saying, as a parent, I would love it if our district had equity amongst every school, every district, every zone. And by you going into a zone system, you have additional money that you're not using for busing that could again be reiterated to our students. If we put our kids first, we're gonna be great.
I'm going to say thank you, Yvonne, because I think she might, Vice President Elliott might still have a lag in her internet. And I just wanted to also address a comment that was made very briefly around our children's zip code and their outcomes based on zip codes. And that data actually already, unfortunately, exists for Rochester. So I do think that, the conversations of whether a neighborhood is safe or not, I certainly don't live in a bubble. I don't live on North Street or North Wilson. I'm on Post Ave right now. Like it's popping over here too. I just want to put that out there. However, and unfortunately, the data around zip codes, health outcomes, financial outcomes, education outcomes, that data has existed for Rochester for many, many years. To tie it back into how we rezone, I think it's a much larger issue for Rochester and the makeup of the neighborhoods that the city has to address and the county has to address. And they have accountability to the quality of life in the neighborhoods. So I just want to put that out there because I don't want that to be a deciding factor for us as school board members. Certainly, we are a part of that issue. And I would argue that we're a part of the issue by having kids all over the place instead of being in their own neighborhoods, right?
Thank you.
But that data exists. If folks are interested in looking in that data, the Rochester Community Foundation has an ACT report card that they put out every year. Common Ground Health also has a health disparities and zone and zip code quality of life report that is an excellent report to read. But again, I just want to put that out there for the community as they start to understand that this is a layered issue and that there is some accountability both to the city and to the county. Thank you.
I think our Vice President is having some challenges with her internet service. So if folks don't mind, I'll go ahead and conclude this portion of the agenda. Although I do have to make sure that we get a motion to approve, accept and approve the ESA minutes. Can I have that motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams, and seconded by Commissioner LeBron.
Yes.
So those minutes have been accepted. All those in favor of accepting those minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Again, Yvonne, and to everybody who made comments, thank you for offering input. I think everybody senses that we've got to either, my grandmother used to say it more graphically, boo-boo or get off the toilet on this issue of what we're going to do. I think that the administration has heard quite a bit tonight, and I don't know, Vice President Elliott, if you would be inclined to have them at your June meeting to give us an update on what progress, if any, has been made, or what direction they're moving in, or what they have done with the information they heard today, but that would be very helpful. Dr. Morris or the superintendent, can you promise us to bring this back on the agenda in June?
We would love to bring it back in June.
And the suggestion I would have respectfully is we do appreciate that we are the decision makers here, but if you could, be closer to a specific recommendation about what you think we should do, right? I think everybody's anxious to move the ball forward in one way or the other. Personally, I am sympathetic to, we've researched this ad nauseum. The data is there, but you are the superintendent and you're part of her team. Make a recommendation. If it is for more research, then state that. We could reject that, of course, but if you believe that there's a choice that can be made, make that recommendation to us. So that's it for that. I'm going to adjourn the ESA committee's meetings because our vice president can't do that.
I think I'm on.
He's back.
You hear me on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. Hi. Sorry about that. I'm not sure. Zoom. So technology. So did we? Let me just thank Dr. Morris and her team. Did we approve the minutes yet?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So anything else for the good of the order? Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you. Commissioner White, President White, I'll turn it back over to you for new business.
All right. I take it there is no new business. I'm looking at the participant list and I don't see any. And that's good because my battery on my computer is about to run dead. So we have to take the survey and then I'll take the motion to adjourn because there is no executive session. Madam Clerk or Tom, can we get that survey?
President White?
Yes, ma'am.
There is one piece of new business.
What's that?
Okay.
Saturday is a national holiday. It's my birthday.
Oh, yes, that is important news. How are you celebrating?
Birthday.
Barbecue with the family.
Oh, you know, with the family. I assume that's biological. That's not the district family?
I'm sorry, I'm holding up the survey. Go for it.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, ma'am.
My survey is missing.
Okay, Madam Clerk, tell me when we got all the results submitted and then we'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'm going to ask that either Tom or Rahima check on that for me. My internet is down, so I'm using my phone and I can't access that information.
Everybody's having a tough time today.
Sophia's giving y'all the motion, y'all.
Motion.
Hey, Sophia.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
She came over and said, motion. When Van said, I'm waiting to give a motion, she's like, motion, Mom. Because she wants to play Uno, y'all. So she wants y'all to.
We're going to let her, through her mom, make the motion. So, Rahima, where are we at?
We're all set with the poll.
Okay. So go ahead. You make the motion. Motion to adjourn. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
I heard two people. I'll go with Commissioner Adams. All those in favor, now, Sophia, we want to hear you say aye. All those in favor of adjourn so that you can go play Uno, say aye.
I watched this.
Aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Meet your mind.